What's going on, everyone? Before we get to the episode, just wanted to let you all know that we are going to be starting a College Football 25 online dynasty. We'll be starting one for PlayStation and one for Xbox. And for more information, go to keyholepod.com. Now, enjoy the episode.
It's caught. Hollywood! Lights! Camera! Action! Hollywood Brown! CD Lamb still running! Hits a corner! CD! For the TD!
People don't know what it is to be champions. Oklahoma invented it.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Through the Keyhole. It's an Oklahoma football podcast. And we were already SEC official and SEC ready, but SEC Media Day has come and gone for the Oklahoma Sooners because we're recording on Tuesday. It's around 7 o'clock. We have heard Brent Venables. We have heard other coaches talk about Oklahoma. We have heard former coaches talk about Oklahoma. Oklahoma was in the spotlight today because SEC Media Day chose to be in Dallas because they've got two new teams to welcome in Oklahoma and Texas, and we are here to talk about things that were talked about earlier. Welcome, everybody. I am Brady Trantham. I am joined by Mr. Matt Burton. Matt, how are you?
Doing well, man. Doing well. Easy show today. Had everything just laid out there on a plate for us. So just talked all OU at the SEC Media Days, man. It was awesome.
Hell yes. That's what we like. Easy stuff. Peyton, you look wonderful with that mustache of yours.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah, that's your cue. Yes, that's Peyton Guthrie.
Yeah. I thought you were just hitting. Yeah. Just pulling it off, getting older. You got to do it every once in a while.
Yeah, you can pull it off. Alan, you look wonderful with the 5 o'clock shadow.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. Yeah, man. Thank you so much. It's kind of like my thing, my vibe, you know.
Perpetual 5 o'clock shadow.
Indeed.
Yeah, that's as far as it grows. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed.
Alan Kinney, not Alan Killjoy, as Matt gave you the alternate ego name last time. That was actually really good, Matt. I still
Thank you.
Every time I wanted to say it, but we talked about, like, you had a tweet on Saturday about leaving long legs. We don't need to get into like what exactly this was about. If you were all interested, go to Blatant Homerism's Twitter account, Alan Kinney, and you can find it. I was fully prepared at the time to respond with, "Oh, here comes Alan Killjoy."
I'm not even sure where to go right now just based on what we're talking about. But yeah, there's a certain news event that happened while I was watching one of the scary movies I've seen in a while. It was just very surreal coming out to that.
And then you walked out to the scary movie that is reality.
Indeed.
But it's okay. We're talking about football here, so you get to ignore all the scary realities. But like I said, it's Through the Keyhole. You know this. It's the free pod. Welcome to all of our listeners that have been with us since the beginning, back in 2018, 2019. And I mentioned that not just because it's polite to welcome all of our listeners that have been with us for the longest time, but we've actually had a few new reviews, one of which I think it was Blade Master. Not Master, but Masta, left us a review on Apple Podcasts saying that he has been with the podcast since it was hosted by myself, Rufus Alexander, and John Hoover, the good old days. So thank you to you. And I hope that you are you represent, hundreds, if not thousands of people that have been with the show for that long and been with it since it was me and Keegan, Renault, and then with Peyton and with Matt and now with Alan. So thank you to all, and to all of our new listeners. Thank you all so much for giving us a listen. We appreciate that. If you do not know, we've got a free website, keyholepod.com, where you can find not just a cool t-shirt that I've been pumping over the last few weeks, but you can find articles written by Alan Kinney. You can find any kind of OU football stuff. And especially as we get closer to football season, as we get closer to fall camp, there will be more and more stuff rolling out, no doubt. There are also, I don't know when, but I've seen plans for a new t-shirt, which will make all the OU fans very, very happy. So look out for that on keyholepod.com. Also, we have a Patreon page. And if you are so inclined to help support what we do here at Through the Keyhole, please give our Patreon a look-see. You can join for free, I think, for a month if you want to check out what we roll out you think, well, I need to see it first before I support. Completely understand that. We've got a few tiers where it's like $1, $4, or $5. I can't exactly remember, but try it out. Patreon.com/through the keyhole. I just wrote a Monday post, a few days ago, because it's Tuesday. That went out. I also had a Patreon podcast with my good friend Todd Lisenby, formerly of 107.7 The Franchise, currently filling in for 107.7 The Franchise, doing his own thing. We put his Patreon, his YouTube channel, and the show notes for that Patreon podcast. And he's got some cool stuff coming out. We had a fun time talking to him, so go check that out as well. And like I mentioned, podcast reviews, thank you to the new ones that we've received over the last few weeks. Keep them coming. We got up to 182. So please keep them coming on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Leave us a 5-star rating and review. But now that I got that out of the way, it's SEC Media Day. And I feel like I talked longer than Brent Venables, which is something I did not think I would say. Brent Venables did not talk that long. And Alan, are we seeing head coach Brent Venables reveal himself before our very eyes now that he's like, no more diatribes, no more paragraphs? I'm just here to answer some questions, and I'm here to present to you the University of Oklahoma, just poor old Oklahoma, who ain't ready for the grind of the SEC. But he had some pretty cool quotes himself without talking that long. So Alan, it's just incredible to see our very own head coach grow up before our eyes.
Yeah, you know what? I had about 15 minutes to watch around the time when right when he went on, and I was shocked that
they had already cut the commercial.
Yeah, exactly. He was answering questions and everything like within just a few minutes. I mean, if you listen to what he had to say at the beginning, it was mainly like thanking the SEC for being for making the transition so easy and everything. Maybe it's just a matter of, Venables not wanting to bore everybody, and kind of wanting to, seize the moment. Really, it's the OU's kind of, OU's had the, SEC debut on campus, but this is a chance to, for a broader audience, really to get to know the program, I guess. And maybe that's what Venables was going for. But, he was, there was certainly a little bit more polish than that very first year when there's blowing and going and everything and fire hoses and mouths and whatnot. Like he's definitely got his standard lines that he goes to, and all in all, I mean, it was just an opportunity to kind of tout the program, for what it is.
I mean, I guess did you cut in when he was answering questions? Did anybody see him? I think like 30 minutes after he answered questions, he went to the desk with Dusty and Tessitore and Roman Harper, and I can't remember who the other. There was another like white guy there.
Oh, Kublik.
Okay, yeah. Did you guys? Anybody hear what he was saying on that one?
Nope.
He got asked some general question about like recruiting players in the SEC, I think. And he was talking about how he's always loved recruiting players out of the state of Florida and how he's very familiar with the state. And he said something to the effect of, oh yeah, like got those guys in Florida, they come out the womb ready to run like press coverage or something like that. Or I'll be like, hey, let's run cover 2. And they're like, no, I want to run press. And it's just the way that he said they come out their mama's womb wanting to play press. And Roman Harper loved it. So, I mean, I've seen Peyton from, not that this necessarily matters, but we've we've seen coaches kind of like make somewhat fools of themselves. Not that Brent really has, like we've already kind of talked about. He used to talk for a long time. And he did say like one thing, the blowing and going thing that people are like, what? Even Danny Stutzman kind of has made fun of that. But just seeing on Twitter, seeing some general like SEC people that are getting retweeted onto my feed, it seems like the greater SEC media was like really impressed with Brent Venables. So it's not that it's going to matter on Saturdays when football starts, dude. But I mean, it was a good showing for Brent. It was a good showing for OU. Good introduction officially to the rest of the SEC, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, to continue on a little bit of the theme we had earlier in the podcast, July 16th, 2024, Brent Venables finally became the head coach of the University of Oklahoma.
Oh my.
No, Brent. Like I watched this press conference and the questions. He went through it. He seemed pretty calm and collected through all of that. I think one of the reasons why he isn't as verbose, because I think he's still pretty long-winded when it comes to local stuff, is that he was asked questions that we've been answering and that he's been answering for like the last year and a half, if that makes sense. He's like, how are you guys going to handle the week to week, things like that. And
I have no idea.
Even those answers so many times, they get kind of shorter.
Did you guys
kind of fine-tuned down?
Sorry, but did you guys catch one of the questions that I heard was from a reporter from the Bryant College Station paper, and he was asking about paper, website, whatever, asking about OU's recruiting, and he's like, how do you feel about going up now against programs like Texas A&M and Arkansas? Those are the two that he used. And I was just like, really?
Just now.
It's also that kind of stuff too. Again, it's the first official SEC media days and everything, and we're all pretty insular to a certain degree. I remember when this was first announced, I had on is it Joe Goodman? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And he was like completely unaware of Oklahoma as a football program.
For those who
stuff
don't
like that.
know,
He had written books about Nick Saban and about these things. He's like, yeah, they're pretty good, right? And I think it's just some of these SEC media people are, it's the same guys who are saying the Egg Bowl is a bigger rivalry than Red River, and stuff like that, where it seems like it's, I don't know, they're behind the times, I guess, or maybe not exposed to as much national football. And I guess the question would be, why would they be? They're in the SEC, and that's what we've been told for the last 15 years is the end-all be-all of college football. So why would they care what teams did in the Big 12 or Pac-12, at that point in time? So that kind of stuff's just interesting. And maybe there's an outlook of what these media members have also bought into the whole idea of Oklahoma's going to come in and they're going to be 6-6, into perpetuity.
Yeah, and cool on them. I mean, Alan, I think we kind of mentioned it in the previous podcast about how, at least when I was younger growing up, the SEC felt very regional. And I should have been more specific, because every conference, and college football is a regional sport, and every conference is extremely regional. But to what Peyton was talking about, the SEC was regional in the respect of they didn't give a damn about anything that came that was around the SEC. They only cared about what was going on in the SEC. And that to me was always kind of weird, because yeah, of course, back in the day, all I cared about was, still OU football. I had a great familiarity with the Big 12 and all the teams that OU had to play, but I knew that Ohio State, Michigan was one of the biggest rivalries in college football. I knew that Alabama and Auburn was the biggest rivalry in the SEC. Even as just an interstate rivalry, compared to OU and OSU, it's not that. It's much bigger than that. But like, I know these things, and it just really seemed like, yeah, the SEC is just so like, oh wait, there's football played outside of the Confederacy. The old, like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. And I guess Oklahoma's won a bunch of games before, but that was back in the 50s or 60s. It's not going to matter, because Alan, oh my God, if I hear week to week grind one more time, especially like in terms of like physicality, look, everybody's got to deal with that. Everybody has to deal with attrition. And no doubt OU has had the advantage of playing in a conference where even when they deal with injuries, they have, backups that are still probably better, at least in terms of recruiting rankings, probably still better than their opponent on the other side, because of just how OU recruits relative to Iowa State, Baylor, West Virginia, so on and so forth. So yeah, that's true. But no matter what, like when A&M has attrition during their season, they're replacing them with some high-end talent, like 4 high-end 4 stars and even some 5 stars. But they're inexperienced. They're not developed. So you're just kind of throwing kids out there to not necessarily succeed, which is why programs like Texas A&M routinely bring in great talent, but they don't really do much with it. So going back to the whole grind week to week thing, I'm just like, well, yeah, in the event that OU has some injuries, like, yeah, we're fucked. Like, but you could say that about Ole Miss. You could say that about Alabama. You could say that about LSU. If anybody deals with injuries or attrition, there's going to be a toll that you have to reckon with on the week to week grind, because like we on this podcast have been rambling about for months is I think playing in the SEC is going to be better, because I think OU would rather find themselves in a week to week situation where they're just saying, you think our players are better than you think your players are better than ours? Okay, we'll find out. Not, oh God, here comes a bunch of stupid motions. They've held back their offense for 3 months and afforded, like, they've allowed themselves to lose 3 games already because they put all their little heart and soul into this game against us. That won't happen. So I don't know. Maybe the physical week to week grind is actually something I'm looking forward to as an OU fan.
Yeah, I think that I try not to let injuries like color my opinion too much of a season or a team, insofar as like all teams have injuries. Like one team might get it worse than the others, but like it starts again to matters of gradations there, right? I think that I guess my concern for OU this year specifically is that, given like how hard the schedule it is, and given how kind of backloaded it is. I mean, LSU might have played some terrible defense last year, but they're still a very physical team, just looking up and down the roster. Bama's still going to be a very physical team. So, I mean, like, the grind in that sense might hurt OU in this if they've taken more lumps going into that part of the season, right? But I mean, all in all, yeah, you'd rather. I don't know about rather, but it's just a different kind of challenge, and I think that what I'm looking forward to is like watching how OU levels up. Not like you mentioned. I mean, kind of every week being solid verbals. Dan Rubenstein once I'm referring to some of these games as the snake in the toilet game. Like you go in the bathroom and, oh God, there's a snake in the toilet. Like you go in and, oh my God, you just fumbled the opening kickoff against Kansas or whatever, and they took it in for a touchdown, and you're like, oh God, okay, it's gonna be one of those kinds of days. I don't, OU won't have as much of that, and there'll be more kind of, spark around the program. So, all those kinds of things really kind of go into how I look at this season. And I mean, OU's roster, clearly, I mean, Venables himself said it's not where we want it to be yet, but I mean, it's not like it's not like they're walking in, with a bunch of like pipsqueaks out there, right? Like, I mean, it's OU's, fairly well equipped for this kind of thing at this point.
Well, it's interesting that you say that with the pipsqueak thing, because I mean, obviously this is a podcast, so no one could see what I just saw. But you said, like, it's not like OU's walking into the SEC with a bunch of pipsqueaks, and then Peyton, who was looking at his phone, just went, "Huh," and looked right at you when you said it. So, Peyton, I was going to ask you about this very thing, because I'm looking forward to the physical week to week grind, and I think that it will suit OU better, not just in the short term, but in the long term. But you have been the big proponent of like OU just needs bigger humans, especially on the interior of the defensive line. Well, OU has at least, they've got 2 starters that are north of 300 pounds that are large humans in their own respect, in DeJoun Terry and Dominic Williams. They've got another guy in Jaden Jackson who's probably going to be heavily involved in that rotation of players. But that's about it. You're looking at Grayson Holton, who's around 291, so maybe he'll be near 300 pounds, but he's more of a twitchy guy than a mauler. So you, as the person who's been the harbinger of doom when it comes to like, hey, is OU going to stop the run this year with nobody over 300 pounds? I mean, how do you interpret the SEC people saying, like, I don't know how they're going to handle the physical week to week grind, knowing the type of the body types that OU is rolling into the SEC with, at least in year one?
Well, there's 2 answers to this. The reason why I kind of perked up on that is Brent's comments in and of himself, talking about the roster, saying, hey, we've got 24 players who are multi-year starters coming back. And then he also said, but we have 52 players who are freshmen or sophomore. So it's still very much so a young team. Yeah, I think he says like 20. No, he said 30 something players who will have their first year, including portal transfers, coming into the University of Oklahoma. So it's still a lot of youth and a lot of injection in that. The top part of their team being only 24, 25-ish people out of the 85 lets you know that it is a young team at that point in time. Now, to your point, Oklahoma is just bigger. Look at the defensive lineman sizes. Look at the offensive lineman sizes. I mean, they're all 300 plus across the board, I believe. And you got a few who are like 315, 320. They're all very big, especially up the middle. Like that's where Oklahoma is going to have to make its hay. The tackle situation, if Sexton comes back pretty good, maybe one of those is taken care of, and then you just only run his direction or something like that. So that part I'm feeling okay. I won't say okay, but I feel a little bit better on. The issue is just the youth mixed with the size. That's where it kind of happens there, because you can have an 18-year-old. You have an 18-year-old who's 305 pounds, 6'6", 305 pounds, right? Whatever. Then you have a 22-year-old who's the exact same measurements. There's just going to be a level of physical maturation that the 22-year-old has, to where the body composition, much like how Brent Venables is changing the roster composition, the body composition is going to be just a little more dense, I guess, if lack of a better term. Building muscle takes time. Building good muscle takes time. I've been lifting for almost 20 years now, and it's just slow progression to where I know I'm stronger than I've ever been in my life, but I also can't do stupid young man stuff anymore. So it's kind of like this trade-off. Like I might not be as stupidly explosive as I was, but my floor is just ridiculously higher than it was 10 years ago, if that kind of makes sense. So there's going to just be a physical maturation this team's going to have to go through, where 2025 looks a lot better for that reason. In 24, if Jaden Jackson is in your two deep, who I would suggest and predict he will be, and you have David Stone coming in for pass rushing downs, they're going to make mistakes. They're going to get pushed around. David Stone's getting pushed around in the spring game. Anytime there's a double team, just getting scooped up. Nothing bad. It's just he was having to go against other big human beings, 2-on-1 stuff. Jaden Jackson did a lot better splitting those and handling that stuff, but he's still just a freshman at that point in time. So if Oklahoma does start getting worn down, guys start getting hit, Jaden starts having to start games, things of that nature. Maybe it's not earned, but like pressed into action. That's just going to be the issue from that side. But the positive is that Oklahoma does seem to have built a roster, or at least in the middle of constructing their roster, to where it's large enough now to handle some of this stuff, handle these offensive lines. They're going to walk in at 330, averaging 330 across the board or something. When at, the Big 12 teams, besides like a Kansas State or something like that, were generally a bit smaller, that we're used to seeing. And they would be able to combat that with wider splits and a quicker pass game, things, misdirection, things of that nature, to kind of overcome that. And the SEC doesn't have that disadvantage.
Yeah, and not to pick on Texas A&M, because it's too easy to do, and I've already done it in this episode. I'll pick on Mike Stoops. You could find yourself in this situation, like in the events, like kind of what you're talking about, Peyton. You've got like a few guys who are older, who are experienced, not just themselves, but in the program under Brent Venables, and who have the physical makeup to basically just be like, that's a guy I could see on a Power 5 team in a blue blood school in the SEC, like DeJoun Terry, like he belongs. But you are outnumbered by a bunch of freshmen and sophomores who are younger, inexperienced, not physically developed just yet like these other players are. So you can't help but just kind of prognosticate the fact that, okay, well, at some point someone's going to have a bum ankle, or they're not going to be able to play at 100% like they were earlier in the year. So you're going to have to rely on that depth that is inexperienced. This is kind of where you could find yourself in a bad run, like how Mike Stoops was in the last handful of years as the DC at OU, where he would have a few guys who were experienced in the secondary who we had seen, for their, 2 or 3 years as starters or players. Yeah, they're not spectacular. They're nowhere near like physically where we'd want them to be, but they're what we got. Hopefully they're healthy. And then, with 1/3 left of the season, it always seemed like, well, they would get cooked so much that Mike would just throw true freshmen out there to the fire, and some of them would float and others would sink. And when that happens, you're not developing anybody. You're just basically sticking shit on the wall and see what sticks. So, or throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. So, I don't want that to happen. I'm also not trying to sit here and say I'm assuming that no injuries or of any kind will occur, but I'm putting my faith in that if you're going to have a coach that's going to have to rely on some inexperienced guys, I would want it to be someone like Brent Venables. So, I mean, Alan, maybe that's blind faith, maybe that's silly of me, but at this point, like, that's the only thing keeping me from saying like, yeah, 6-6 is in the cards. Oh boy, that's not fun.
Yeah, I mean, it, you know, Venables is talking about wanting OU to be a developmental program to that effect, right? So, the idea here is that the backups, I mean, if you look at, for example, at Clemson, what they tend to they had good, retention rates, and what you'd see is, guys would be there either for a while or, the guys who were backing them up, they'd wait their turn and then it would be their shot. It wasn't so much, I mean, for a long time, to your point, Brady, I think that OU was looking for quick fixes on defense. You'd get that, oh, we've got, here comes Buki, he's a 5-star, get him in the lineup immediately, throw him out there where he's, not ready to be, in that kind of position, let alone be kind of like couched as this like savior of the defense. It just he wasn't ready for that. It's a hard thing to do in college football. So I think to that degree, I mean, like, for example, like, look at OU's defensive backs now. For example, a corner. I mean, if the two guys who are on the top line, if one of them goes down, like, let's say that is, I don't know, Gentry Williams and Woody Washington, you're going to have guys who are like, third-year sophomores, fourth-year juniors, behind them, ready to vying to kind of step in and either be second string or, work into the rotation with the ones. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I think, a benefit to this, as opposed to, oh God, we're recruiting this freshman with the idea he needs to play now.
Yeah, I mean, as excited as we all were for guys like David Stone and Jaden Jackson Payton, it's I mean, Jaden Jackson has certainly impressed. David Stone, we've looked at him with a much brighter spotlight than probably like a Jaden Jackson, just because we've known about him for so long and how integral he was to the overall recruiting success of OU. Like, if you're going to be serious about the SEC, if you're going to be serious about like winning championships, you cannot lose on David Stone. So when he gets here and he plays like he did in the spring game, with his physical makeup, you were the one, like, we were sitting right next to each other in the stadium. You were the one telling me like, yeah, he's getting pushed around. Like, I'm not expecting that much, or to expect a lot is a little too much to ask for. So you don't want to find your, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, to expect him to be like, the prince that was promised type
Tommy
of thing
Harris
is a bit much, but yeah, he's going to be able to make plays. Like I said, in my mind, you're going to see David Stone in a lot of third and longs. Like, they're going to try him out there and say, you got one job to go get the quarterback, and it'll be a lot easier for him. I don't want people listening to this, after they've been so gracious and leaving reviews. Not saying a 5-star defensive tackle is bad and we shouldn't have gotten them. He is very, very good. You look at his body, even look at his body, like he's I'm getting way too into the body types, body compositions, but he's like 290, I believe, and he looks really thin still, like, for his frame and everything like that. He looks like he could be pretty thick and still maintain a lot of that quickness. That being said, He's also like a little more narrow than like a Jaden Jackson is. You know, if you just look at them, I mean, he looks. It's weird to say he's a skinny 290.
Between the two of them,
those two.
Between the two of them, only one of them looks truly, truly difficult to move. Now, for all of us, we couldn't move any of them. Maybe you could, Peyton, but
No.
but in terms of like football, it's like, yeah, one of those guys is like, we're not moving him, and that's Jaden
Jackson can be a day-to-day, down-to-down player for Oklahoma, I think right now, which is good for Oklahoma to have that option. David Stone could easily end up having like 5 sacks on the season, and that kind of gets everyone really excited for next year because he does have that explosive. There's a reason why he's a 5-star, and the reason why he's a 5-star is because he's that big and that explosive.
Yeah,
that is the reason why. That is something that Oklahoma has not. Oklahoma's had Jaden Jackson types. I mean, you know, big people who sit in the middle and get in the way. They haven't had, Gerald McCoy since Gerald McCoy, and that's who David Stone is. He's more of a technical guy. Like that was always something like for of that 09 draft, which was like, do you want Sue or McCoy? Sue's the giant, massive, athletic monster guy. And then you had McCoy, who was the technician, who could get into the backfield, move. Not, and again, that makes it seem like McCoy wasn't also like a super athlete, but he is. But David Stone is going to be much more of he's going to know where to put his outside hand on the inside shoulder, then split the double team, and then he's in the backfield all of a sudden. It's just a different style of play in which how Brent Venables wants to promote the havoc. I think he'll be on the field a lot on those third down situations, passing situations.
Well, now that we're on it, hey, Mac, do you mind reading us off? I know Stoya put out the updated roster weights of the defensive line. You might have put out some other ones, but read off what we're dealing with, at least right now. I mean, again, this is we're a few weeks away. I think Sooner Scoop mentioned that they're expecting fall camp to start around like July 28th or 29th. Then that might be too early, but we're still just a few weeks away from the beginning of fall camp. So some of these weights might look really cool right now, but they have yet to like seriously start like playing football and running in Oklahoma heat, where they're probably going to lose a few of these pounds. So, I mean, don't marry yourselves to it.
Right. Yeah. We'll start off with Dominic Williams. I think whenever he announced his transfer, it was going around like he was either 315 or 320. It was somewhere in the middle of that, but he comes in at 319. So basically right where he was listed at coming out of TCU. Grayson Halton is the next one, 291. He is up 7 pounds from the spring. Jaden Jackson is up to 300 pounds, up 5 pounds from the spring. David Stone, 294, up 11 pounds from the spring. And that one, Tyler and I were talking about that yesterday about David Stone. It was a funny moment. I think that it was, in the player breakouts, whenever they start talking to all the freshmen or all the transfers, all the newcomers, and they asked David Stone like what he was weighing, and he was like, somewhere in the 280s. And Tyler and I both were like, okay, so that's like low 280s. Like he just doesn't want to say, but that's like 281, 282. But yeah, up 11 pounds to 294. Dejon Terry up 2 pounds to 323. Devon Sears, the transfer last year from Texas State, up 6 pounds to 295. They got Marcus Strong and Ashton Sanders. Both were true freshmen last year. Strong is up to 290, up 8 pounds, and Ashton Sanders up to 295, up 11 pounds.
Well, I mean, Peyton, you're the expert. I mean, when you see this list, when you saw this list get tweeted out and make the rounds, and we no doubt probably talked about it in our group chat, when you see that, I mean, what's going on in your overall head? Knowing that this is year 3 of Brent Venables at OU, knowing that this is, I mean, yeah, it's the 3rd year of his program, but I mean, we, as he pointed out during SEC Media Day today, to say that he started from square one is unfair because, as we've mentioned on this podcast a handful of times, as he mentioned today, the roster just was nowhere near where it needed to be, after Lincoln Riley left. So, third off season, I mean, what do you think when you see all this added beneficial weight?
For the new guys, It's exciting. With that said, anyone who gains, 10 plus pounds quickly, it's probably not all the best weight you want to have. And that's why they're going to fall back. As you mentioned, the Oklahoma, the dog days of summer, that some of that's going to shred off to a certain degree. Like I would be surprised if David Stone plays at 294 if he's gained 11 pounds in that time frame. My assumption is that's going to devalue itself some at that point in time. The older guys who are holding on to weight, that's what I was just talking about. It's like they're able to maintain that weight and move that size. It's more of like a natural progression of growth. That's just that physical maturation. But yeah, I mean, everyone thinks about, oh man, gaining weight. This seems so much fun. Gaining good, clean weight, especially if you look at Stone and how he's built. That's a horrible diet. It's not horrible. It's just you just have to eat so much damn food, because it's like one Big Mac, or you have to eat like 4 pounds of chicken, to get like the clean equivalency of that amount of calorie intake. So it's tough for that type of stuff. So for the older guys, the guys who haven't had the chance to come in, to me, that's impressive, because it shows you that, the term that Brent Venables uses quite a bit, that the competitive depth is where it needs to be weight wise. But for the new guys, 11 pounds, that's hard to gain and then maintain if it's like that quick. I just don't know if he has the body type to build on 11 pounds of muscle that quickly without it.
What about a guy?
Dirty bulk.
What about a guy in his second year, like Sanders, for example? And that's one guy that I keep wondering. I mean, he's up 11 to 295. It just feels like the more guys you have on the roster that you could stick in there at the nose and not get just absolutely blown away. I mean, I don't know what their plan is exactly for Sanders, but I mean, is that good or bad, would you say?
For a second year guy, something like that, like I was talking about, like the competitive depth side, those guys are, in my opinion, would be good, because when you're first putting people under structure of this nature, under like a strength and conditioning from this thing, it's pretty famous. It's called newbie gains, whatever. So like you instantly get so much stronger, and everyone's like, oh my God. It's like, yeah, because you just lifted for the first time ever. And a lot of these guys, even though they're 5-star football players like David Stone, this is the first time he's gone through a legitimate strength and conditioning. Everyone's got their horror stories from football, but not everyone was high school football players walking around 250 and 8% body fat. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. There's a difference. There's a level of difference there. So I would say David Stone probably hit something that was like akin to like a newbie gain to a certain degree. Kill me if you want to in the chat or whatever. To a certain degree, he's been lifting all of his life, but whatever. Somebody who's coming in their second year and third year, that's probably their body making that switch, I guess, or finally reacting to something from that nature. I don't know. It's hard to go into.
It's the plateau. It's overcoming the plateau, right? Like, I'm sure a lot of people, like a lot of our listeners, I'm sure, no doubt, have gone to a gym at some point in their life. And if you go to a gym consistently for like just a month or two, you will see noticeable difference in your body type, whether you're trying to lose weight or gain muscle. Like, you will see it. That is the most fun time to go to the gym, is when you first start. So if you're on the fence right now, go right the fuck now, because I missed that time.
And we got a place for you to go to.
Yes. We'll talk about that maybe at some point. And shout out to the owner of that place, because I know you listen. But I'm nowhere near Peyton's level, but just to provide some context on this. But I mean, I've only been working out for about, I think, 4 or 5 years. I worked out in college, but I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. I've been working out for like 4 or 5 years now, and I have hovered around I'm 5'11". I've hovered around 215 now for about 5 or 6 months. And I mean, I truly try to push myself in the gym. I go every morning. I wake up at 4:30 and go to the gym every morning. So Monday through Friday. And it is fucking hard. It is so hard to like seriously like change your body type. Now, I'm not a college athlete. It's not my job to do it. So I mainly do it because I enjoy it and I kind of like the challenge, even though I fail at it. But when, 17, 18-year-olds go to college for the first time and they're seriously like working out scientifically for the first time, like Peyton said, like you're going to get some newbie weight, but it's that second and third year where, okay, you've either identified your plateau and pushed past it because you are truly good and you are truly working hard to make the NFL, or you don't. So, I mean, is that fair? Is that what you were kind of trying to say, Peyton?
Yeah, I mean, it's just you get to your ceiling kind of quickly when it comes to this. When you get tossed into this level of strength and conditioning and nutritional, instruction and nutritional plans, you can, the ceiling of it, there's Olympic lifting. Like I haven't hit a clean over 315 in like 5 years. That said, I can hit 290 like 80% of the time. But 5 years ago, 290 was like a 50% lift. But I could hit 315, 320. It was just kind of the floor wasn't as high. So I think you could get to your plateau, as Brady mentioned, fairly quickly, and then the rest of it becomes that physical maturation or emotional maturation or taking time to develop skills and technique to where your floor gets to basically to where now your what's called like moving weight, the weight you could just move, that keeps increasing while your top end may not as well. So that's something I would look to see where David Stone is at. I was talking about, like, I know on any given snap, he can blow by somebody and just take them out. I also know on any given snap, he can get hit by a double team and get washed out of the play. That the floor of him will increase. And those second and third year players, they've been in the system now where the floor is much, much higher to where, like you said, Sanders, I do not expect Sanders to be a starter or to potentially be a difference maker. I do expect him, if he has to play snaps, to have a high enough floor now where it's not like how Oklahoma's been in the past where somebody went down and it's like, well, we're fucked. They're just going to run at that guy now. Yeah. I think that's where Oklahoma is, and that's where you start seeing those second, third year guys and the progress they're making, and that's what you can look at. Because I think a lot of college football fans, Oklahoma fans, and myself included, you look at this stuff and say, who are your star players? And then you kind of forget why it's important to have your 2 deep and your 3 deep, and why it's important for those guys to get good and be good. That to me is something that's going to be very difficult in the NIL system as teams kind of lose the middle of their roster, because you're going to keep your freshmen and you're probably going to keep your starters, but that middle group of the guys who are supposed to be your 2 deep, Sanders could probably start at some other school. I don't know, Washington State or something like that, but they're staying in Oklahoma, and that's providing that, I guess, for lack of a better term, middle class of talent within that roster to stay there. To me, that's what's going to be the hardest for teams to hold on. Unless you're not a team of note, then yeah, it's going to be very difficult to hold on to your star football players. Unless they just love Colorado State and they turn down $600K to go to Kansas State. If you guys heard that complete lie.
Jay Norvell?
Yeah. I mean, maybe sure something happened, but I just don't know they're offering that kid $600K when they got Avery Johnson.
Do we know that that's a lie?
I'm sure someone talked to him about something.
Well, I mean, because we don't know how much money is being tossed around in NIL. A lot of it's just like talk. And some like Ole Miss is like very upfront with their NIL and like the money that they're shelling. Like, right? Because I mean, Alan, if I recall correctly, Bucky Perkins, who you had on a Patreon podcast a few weeks ago, he said like a very high and very exact random number that I thought, like, are they like broadcasting how much money they're spending in NIL? Like it wasn't like $100 million. It's like, yeah, anyone can say that. But he said like, yeah, they've shelled out 72.6 mil. And I'm like, oh, okay. Is that the market?
I don't exactly remember the exact figure, but I do think like clearly Ole Miss has made a point of doing this. And, what you probably end up getting is you go to a booster function, especially if it's a high dollar one, and you're going to get some more transparency about how much money you've raised and what the exact, you'll have people that you got to answer to who want to know the exact figure and who's getting paid what and all that. So, it probably just depends on the circles you travel in.
Yeah. And again, the only reason why I'm asking, like, if that's not a lie or if it is a lie, because we don't know how much money is being shelled out. Like, I wouldn't doubt that Kansas State, like, who are very excited about their quarterback going into this year, Do they need a backup quarterback? They lost Will Howard for a reason. Yeah. I mean, so $600K for essentially a backup quarterback. Like, I don't know if that's overpaying. I don't know if that's underpaying. I don't know if that's fair. And hell, we just spent a few weeks like defending the amount of money, quote unquote, you paid to get Dominic Williams to sign on the dotted line. And we were all like, yeah, you're not overpaying for something for a person that you need. So especially a player of that caliber. So let other people say that it was overpaying. So I don't know. I'm not trying to defend Jay Norvell that much because I blame my lack of belief in a tall receiver playing at OU on him. That is 100% his fault. He's a pretty damn good recruiter, just not the best developer unless you're already Ryan Broyles and you're already Kenny Stills or like 7 games of Jazz Reynolds. Like, yeah, there's not that much to write home about. Justin Brown was good, but he was a Penn State transfer right before the portal. But again, all that bro talk from earlier about gyms and weight and plateaus and stuff, all that to kind of bring it back home of, well, just what does this mean for the short term? Because one thing that's kind of gotten on my nerves, guys, is just people are just so, like we've talked about it ad nauseum, like the conversation surrounding Oklahoma going into the SEC. They're not going into the SEC for 1 year. They're going into the SEC forever. So if OU does go 7-5, God forbid 6-6, I mean, even God forbid 7-5, like I think I would be disappointed if we literally lose every toss-up game. That would be a disappointment to me. But if they go anything south of 8-4, they will play football again the following year, and they will have a lot of returning starters, which is something that they don't necessarily have. That, like, as we've already kind of talked about with all the freshmen and sophomores, and then they will be adding more freshmen and more portal guys to accent their depth that season. So, like, the thing that's really got on my nerves, Peyton, is just, like, they're not ready for it. It's like, well, if they're not ready for it on day one, they'll probably be ready for it, the following day, because we're fucking Oklahoma. Like, this isn't Ole Miss where it's like, let's push all our chips to the center of the table because this is our one chance. This is not Missouri where it's like, this is our one shot, guys, and then it's over. For OU, it's like, yeah, we'll take our punch in the chin just like we did in 2022 when we went 6-7, then we won 10 games the next year. It's like, if we don't win every game this year, I'm sure we'll be fine.
Yeah, that's something. If you just look at the roster stuff and everything that got released, the guys coming back, guys who are healthy, team, the weights and everything. That's basically OU walking up to the roller coaster, and it has a sign saying you must be this tall to ride. Now Oklahoma is that tall to ride. That's where we are right now. And then on the yearly thing, I had some guy on from Tennessee talking about, like, Josh Heupel, and I brought that up. The PCR rating, like, they're hanging under 50%. Josh isn't the strongest recruiter. It's not something he's been, he loves to do. He recruits a really good quarterback. It's like, and that's always kind of their talking point since, like, well, we recruit the positions that matter, and then we kind of fill out the roster of what we need to do, and that's kind of, Lane the same way, Missouri the same way. They're not really strong recruiters. So if you look at Oklahoma is on Buddy Let's PCR sitting at 73% in high school recruiting of its rolling 4 years. It shows that Oklahoma should, if Brent Venables is a good football coach, and they do have a good football staff, should trend past these teams eventually, just because they'll have a stronger team. They'll have, bigger defensive lines, more impactful defensive lines, offensive lines that can handle the pressure of other defensive lines, things of that nature. And just look at the wide receiver group, which are top 3 in the SEC already potentially, and there's the really tall wide receiver who I expect to have really good this year that no one even mentions it that much, even around Oklahoma circles. So everything's about Burks and Nick Anderson and Andre Anthony if he comes back healthy, and Najilla Farouk, all that type of stuff. So the point I was trying to make, I guess, is that Oklahoma, if it continues to recruit and it continues its development that we're seeing, it will trend past an Ole Miss, Missouri, those type of teams which are pushing in for right now. unless, based on some of the articles that you wrote, Brady, unless Brent is more of a Gibbs, is more of a Fairbanks. And then we'll find out, and then the team will have been set up to be trending in the correct direction for the guy who comes in next, and potentially he's the guy who takes Oklahoma to the next step. So regardless of what Brent does in the win-loss record, he is doing what University of Oklahoma needs to have happen with this roster composition and talent acquisition.
Yeah. I mean, it's, to me, really what it comes down to is you can either have this opinion or you don't. OU is not where they need to be. True. I think you could say that same thing technically about Alabama, because it's like, yeah, they've got all this talent they've recruited. They've got the depth. They're a proven commodity, even though Nick Saban isn't there anymore. But Jalen Milroe puts a cap on their success because of his inability to play to perform the full capabilities of a quarterback, especially in the system that Alabama has played in. Georgia doesn't necessarily have that many flaws, other than they had a problem against Saban, who's not there anymore. So maybe they don't have any flaws. Texas has a plethora of flaws. Speed limits. Well, no, it's not a flaw because, well, I guess they get caught, but the speed limit sign is not, it doesn't deter them from speeding. Or where was I going with this? Oh man, I am screwed up. No, Texas has a lot of flaws. Every team has a lot of flaws, but I feel like if one thing happens, and I'll throw this at you, Alan, if one thing happens, and we talked about this, or at least I wrote about it, I think 2 weeks ago, the offensive line is capable of protecting Jackson Arnold. I think Jackson Arnold showed enough in his 1.5 games that he is somewhere near being the guy that everybody wanted 2 years ago out of high school. So if the offensive line can protect him, I think OU is just good enough and has the capability to be special at the most important position, quarterback, that those things can overcome the fact that they only have 2 starters in the interior of the defensive line that are 300 pounds. That those few things can overcome the fact that OU secondary, until we see it, cannot get off the field on 3rd and longs with zone coverage. Like, it is just an inherent flaw in Brent Venables' system for whatever reason. Like, they've not been consistent with that. So, yes, that is on a very, very fragile foundation, but damn it, it's what I believe in, Alan. So, is that something you should, put a lot of stock in? I don't know. That's why I'm asking you.
Well, yeah, if you have a great quarterback, that's one of the great equalizers, right? But the way I look at this is when, people, oh God, what if OU, yeah, you're going to figure out like how hard it is. OU will go 7-5, then you'll see what it's like. Okay, I expect OU to get better in that case, because that's what OU has done since as long as I've been alive, and since well before then. So like that whole thing about like being SEC ready, it's like, okay, maybe they're not yet, but I think that I guess the way I look at this conversation is that I think that a lot of people maybe who aren't as familiar with the program kind of look at it as OU having a kind of a hard cap on how good OU can really be. And I don't necessarily agree is there, but I think though that like not every program is going to be able to go on Georgia and Alabama type runs anymore, right? You're not going to have that kind of level of dominance. I just don't think you're going to get that for sustained periods of time anymore. So, in that sense, being part of that group, you're going to have years where it breaks right for you. You're going to have years where it doesn't. Right, 11-1 versus an 8-4, just based on how the schedule breaks, for example. So I look at that and I think OU is getting there. That's about the best way I can put it. And if you do get a situation where you have a great quarterback, that Auburn team that won the national championship with Cam Newton was like as close to a one-man show as you're going to get. And that just showed. That team was so good, had to win a lot of tight games, but they had that one special player. I don't think Jackson Arnold's Cam Newton by any stretch, but I mean, few quarterbacks will be, but it just goes to show like that levels the playing field. I think if you have a player like that behind center.
And also, like, if you guys have been checking out the K Ford ratings on Twitter, he's been doing his historical rating systems. And basically every single time someone asks him to do, can you do from this year to this year? Like, Oklahoma's always in the top three, if not number one. Like, you have to be very, very specific about your selection of years. Like, can you show me the top teams from 1994 to 98?
Yeah.
That's like the only time Oklahoma isn't in the top five, top three, or the number one, like, power rated program, in college football history. I think they're number two since World War II. Like, they have Ohio State just barely like half a percentage point above them. If you do 2000 to now, Oklahoma's number one. You do 2014 to now, Oklahoma's number two. I mean, it's just Oklahoma. The reason Oklahoma's issue, and I think Brady this is my not conspiracy theory, my thesis statement or whatever about Brady as an Oklahoma fan, is that University of Oklahoma has been at the door too many damn times to not have walked through it since winning it in 2000, to where it's just kind of like, damn it. And then this allows a team like Missouri or Ole Miss or like these fan bases who say, yeah, we know how far you can get, but wait until we get there. We'll walk through the door. In Oklahoma, it's just kind of been like stuck at the door frame. Like, can't quite make that last step. And it just feels like it's a weight on the program. I think when Oklahoma finally does win the playoff game, when they actually get another national championship, it's going to be like that Steve Young celebration of getting the monkey off his back. Like, hey, we did it. Finally. Good Lord. Like, what happened here? There's a step that was missing that Oklahoma's going to have to rediscover. But there is also something about saying, every single year we're pretty much in the top five. That's fun. We never have to worry about it being a bad team. But Alan, as you said, sometimes it's better to fail. And if you're going to fail, just fail fast. Get it done, get it out of the way. Let's figure out what's going to work next. Oklahoma, under a previous regime, was really good at playing it year by year, I guess, and then keeping Oklahoma alive while being dead. I guess, like, you knew what the final outcome of those teams were going to be. I guess, like, I know how the story's going to end already. This under Brent Venables feels like a story somewhat untold, because this version of an Oklahoma team hasn't been built since Bob Stoops first came to Oklahoma, like building it in this manner and allowing it to mature. Now, obviously, Bob won it immediately, so it's a little bit different there. But the monster that became Oklahoma for those first 8 years, you can kind of feel it moving in that direction if they can keep this recruiting momentum up.
Well, Bob won it immediately because he didn't have to go to Jordan-Hare Stadium.
Didn't have to.
They didn't have the week-to-week grind, even though they played. Even though they played Texas K-State number 2 in the country on the road, and then Nebraska number 1 in the country. They had a bye week, but 3 games in a row. Yeah. Oh well. Oh, you have a big stadium with a lot of people who will show up to watch us play. We have never experienced that, guys. That is brand new to us. We played in the farm league. Anywho, another thing that kind of goes into all this, like short-term, maybe long-term success for OU, but more so short-term, is we got some relatively good news from Brent Venables earlier today on the injury front. And this is something I didn't even expect to happen today. This was not something I was hoping somebody would ask, because I'm just so used to coaches being like, nah. But Matt, do we have a list of the injury updates that I think Stoya had it out?
Yeah, actually, boom. Wow, the power of editing. I'm here. Brent Venables spoke with local media briefly earlier. George Stoya said, but Andre Anthony was the first one. Says still not fully cleared. Hopeful that he can practice before the first game. Number 2, Gentry Williams, fully released. Garen Hatchett, fully released. Casey Thompson, fully released as well. Jalil Farouk says, take things easy. Did not have surgery. It says week prior to the first game. So we'll see what happens there with Jalil Farouk. I don't even realize, I guess, that
It looked like he broke his foot like literally the day before the spring game. Like he was in
Okay.
a walking
That's
boot or
right.
something.
That's
Yeah.
right. I do remember that. The last one, though, Troy Everett says way ahead of schedule, back sooner than later.
The Andrew Anthony one is very interesting to me because I think Scoop put out on one of their podcasts like back in the spring that Andrell, like from what they were hearing, Andrell was like way behind schedule, and any thought that he'd be ready for game one was like completely and utterly far fetched. That could have been true at the time, and then things have progressed in a positive direction to now where it seems more hopeful or likely that he could be ready to at least start practicing before game one. I mean, OU doesn't need Andrew Anthony, but I was kind of under the impression this entire offseason that we're probably not going to have Andrell going into the Cotton Bowl, or if we do, that will be his first game back, hopefully. And I would rather him have like a few games under his belt to, get ready for the grind of the schedule. But I mean, anybody else excited about the potential of adding Andrell to this already like really good receiving core? Because for those who do not remember, when he got hurt, we were like nails on it, I think, on the post game pod after like we were all high fiving each other about OU beating Texas. Like, hey, losing Andrell sucks because one of our biggest flaws 2 years ago when we went 6-7 was our, was it the third down conversion, or it was like yards per completion. And OU's offense had greatly improved up until the Texas game, and they continued it on, except for they had a few hiccups immediately after, and we kind of called it. It was like, was Andrew Anthony like awesome? You look at the numbers, and it's like, yeah, he was pretty damn good. And he was a large reason why the offense made such a leap forward, because Dylan Gabriel had absolute trust in a stud of a receiver that is Andrew Anthony, and he unfortunately gets hurt, but then that allows Nick Anderson to develop and play more. Jalil Farouk did not take up the mantle like I think we all hoped he would. But I mean, Alan, Andrell, is that the big surprise for you? The biggest positive injury update, or is there something else?
I mean, Andrew, I gotta be honest, I'm still not like so hopeful that OU will get that much out of him, just because the fact that it's taking this long for him to kind of get back in the swing suggests that whatever setback he had that, elongated his recovery time, probably was significant. But I'm not a doctor, obviously. I'm just speculating. I'm really excited to see that Gentry Williams is back, like, because he just seemed to be he couldn't stay on the field last year. If they get it to a point where he's, ready to go from day one and they get a full year out of him, he could be the best player on the entire defense, in my opinion. He's got that big of a ceiling. And also good to see Everett making his way back faster. I don't think Everett is like some kind of star offensive lineman, but OU needs competition. They need depth there, and getting him back will, at least, kind of play in both those respects.
True that. I mean, Troy Everett as a center kind of freaked me out before I'm not happy he got hurt, but I think his injury allowed like a little window of opportunity that OU took a full advantage of, and they were able to get the kid from SMU, who is more of a center than Troy Everett is. Like classically, he played 3 years at SMU at center. But Troy Everett being healthy to either start somewhere on the offensive line or just be a heavy rotational guy like that, I like that. I do not mind. The other thing that kind of jumps out to me, and I'll ask you, Peyton, is, when you see Gentry Williams, excuse me, my hick accent, fully released, do you look at that the same way I do? And I'm like, okay, he's healthy now, but please don't let your shoulder get shredded again. Like, please don't be cursed to be a fragile player, because Gentry is awesome. Like, he could legitimately, if he's healthy, he showed me enough that I'm like, he could be one of the best players if not the best player on a defense that has Billy Bowman and Danny Stutzman on it. Maybe that's a little far fetched, but it just, to me, I think it just comes down to just be on the field more than, I think Brent said it, like he technically started 10 games, but he played no more than 3 games total snaps wise, which is incredible to me.
Yeah, Yeah, he's a first round draft pick type of player if he's fully healthy. Now the shoulder stuff, shoulders are tricky. It's
Yeah.
just how it is. There's a lot of muscles in there that hold it all together, and it is something that he'll have to basically just maintain. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he's in one of those shoulder braces just as a precaution, at this point in time to hold that stuff together. But yeah, having him healthy there, he becomes your best cornerback, or he just is your best cornerback if he's healthy at that point in time. And you're mentioning, and here's like I'm on a hot take, my hot take here. You mentioned Danny Stutzman and Billy Bowman and yada yada yada. I don't know if Danny Stutzman and Billy Bowman are the best players on the defense as of June 16th, 7:57 p.m. 2024. I think they may be more productive, but if the Bowens, if Peyton grows, if Gentry keeps moving, you have Dominic Williams, if he steps into the thing that we believe him to do, those guys may be your leaders on defense, and then they're surrounded by these other, top caliber NFL type talents, which is what we haven't seen out of Oklahoma in a while. So that to me is like, and I know it's fun because those are the guys who go to the media days and they represent the program. And I'm not saying Dane Stutzman isn't good. I'm just saying we're in a position now to where the guy we all really know is really good and potentially is an All-American, but there are people on the same team who are just better than him. That is an extremely good position to be in the back half of that defense.
And I guess the last observation I have is, did Casey Thompson tear his ACL like in the first or second game of the year last year?
I believe so. Yeah. It was early in the season.
So him being fully, ready to practice full 100% is not a surprise at this point. There wasn't a surprise to see that.
I don't believe so.
Were we expecting him to be ready game one? Like I'm finding all this out right now because I'm dumb. Apologies.
That's a good question. I think so, but
Yeah.
I kind of get the impression he might even game one, he might even start off as third string. I don't know.
Well, I mean, as long as he's able to be suited up and healthy, like I was just hopeful that he would be able to put pads on and be healthy enough to stay on the sideline game one, because I think his experience, some of the pedigree he brings with him, he's been around the block to say the least. I think that will do Jackson Arnold some good. And we know why he's here. I mean, in the event that if Casey Thompson's healthy and Jackson Arnold rolls his ankle and we just need someone to go out there to hike the ball, like, yeah, you're probably going to put Hawkins out there. In the event Jackson Arnold, hopefully this doesn't happen, gets hurt for a significant amount of time, like if a BYU situation happens again, like I don't know if you're going to throw true freshman Michael Hawkins out there in the SEC. I would rather just like, okay, Casey has played 1,000 games and has been in college football for a long time, so throw him out there instead. Maybe use Hawkins here and there in a package, but no. Like I was just hopeful that Casey would be ready game one to be second or third string and just be there for Jackson. But maybe that's just something that doesn't matter. I mean, I don't know. But whatevs. Gentlemen, anything else? I mean, we barely touched on like anything specifically that Brent talked about. But again, like it was just, he talked for 6 minutes. Like I was fully expecting, like waking up today, having a content gold mine, and Brent didn't give us that. We had things to talk about, but a lot of it was just reports and reactions and a few anecdotes here or there. But was anything missed?
No, nothing missed. I do want to already announced it on the Patreon. So if anyone listening to this, if you made this far, one, thank you. Two, we'll be hosting a NCAA 2025 Dynasty, one for PS5, one for Xbox. We'll make some private channels on Discord so you guys can schedule anything of that nature. So if you want to play against other members of the Keyhole Patreon supporters, feel free to jump in on that. I'll make another post kind of asking for everyone's usernames and stuff this weekend. When I get the game and I can play it, I did not spend $100 to play early. So we'll get that part hanging out. So if you guys haven't seen that, go check out Patreon and keep an eye on that Dynasty information if you want to play against your fellow cohorts, so to speak.
I am fairly disappointed in myself for being so upset that the game has the fans on the wrong end of the stadium when OU and Texas play in the Cotton Bowl. Because that's something that Texas has wanted for a long time. Like they've wanted to like alternate like where the fans are because they're so sensitive down there, which again, that's not an insult. It's okay to be sensitive, everybody, and be in touch with your emotions. But Texas people are very sensitive because they don't want their players walking through a tunnel or a bunch of OU fans are sharing their opinions with them. So seeing people like post images online or seeing videos online of, yeah, the Texas fans are on the tunnel. I'm like, is this on purpose? Are they trying to get this, make this become a thing? Because that would greatly anger me. Oh, well, it is what it is. I think we're just going to hang it up for there, guys. We've got some Patreon stuff coming. Like Peyton mentioned, some other Patreon stuff. We'll have stuff on keyholepod.com. We've got a t-shirt that I like that everybody loves. We've got a new t-shirt coming. So check out keyholepod.com. If you have not done so, please, please, please leave us a 5-star rating and review. We will greatly appreciate that on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. You can just leave us a 5-star rating because I think that's all that they let you do. I think we got up to 52 on Spotify. We're at 182 on Apple Podcasts. So let's make those numbers go a little bit higher. It helps the show out. So if you want to help us out, but you don't want to donate some money, we understand that. Do not fret. But please, another way you can help us is by rating us with a good review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. So give us a chance, I guess I should say. But for Matt Burton, Peyton Guthrie, Alan Kenny, I'm Brady Trantham. Everybody, thank you so much for listening to Through the Keyhole. Until next time, Boomer.
Sooner.